Hi, and welcome to the Thrive Alcohol-Free podcast. I'm Dupe Witherick, alcohol-free well-being and transformational coach, and the best-selling author of A Cocktail of Clarity, How to Ditch Drinking, Embody a Joyful New Identity, and Thrive Alcohol-Free. This podcast will show you that being alcohol-free is not what the traditional narrative says. And even though alcohol is so ingrained in our society that it is okay to give yourself permission to stop drinking if you want to. And you do not have to wait until you hit rock bottom. It is certainly not boring, and I believe ditching drinking is just the start to living an extraordinary life. By getting rid of this one thing, it allows the doors to open to endless possibilities and opportunities. Each week, we will have guests on who are at various stages of the alcohol-free journey, from those who are curious to those who have been alcohol-free for years. We will also have experts on talking about different topics relating to alcohol and beyond. Through these conversations, you will discover what it means to thrive alcohol-free. Enjoy. Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of the Thrive Alcohol Free podcast. I'm delighted you are here, and I hope you are having a wonderful week. I have just come off a masterclass that I did for the women's chapter on human design, which was lots of fun. And I'm sure I need to do an episode on human design, but it really is an amazing self-awareness deconditioning tool, and it's the science of differentiation. It helps us to really live out who we are and be aware of who we are and know our true selves. And it's so funny, every time I do these sessions or I do individual sessions, it's amazing how much it resonates with people. So this session I covered the type, strategy and authority, and they say if you follow your type, strategy and authority alone, and there are lots of layers, but if you just follow those three things, you'll see that life will feel a bit more ease-filled and you'll be able to make decisions better. And yeah, it's a great tool. So if you are curious about human design, feel free to head to my website, thrivealcoholfree.com/human design. You can download your chart there and find out what type you are. There are 5 types. There's the manifestor, the generator, the manifesting generator, the projector, and the reflector. And you'll also be able to see what your strategy and authority are. And you can go and book a session as well. I do human design sessions, which are 90-minute sessions, which delve into your individual human design and talks through your strengths and your profile, the character that you're meant to play in this world. And as I said, the reaction I've had from people that do these sessions, they have really felt that they are validating. I think a lot of us know deep down who we are and what we're capable of, but maybe we shy away from actually doing those things. And I think it just helps people to understand themselves better. So who's it for, you may be thinking? If you are going through a time of transition, if you're feeling frustrated, angry, bitter, or disappointed, if you're feeling uncertain about the direction you want to go in, or you're on a personal growth journey or at a crossroads in your career, then human design is for you. And finally, if you are looking for validation of aspects of yourself that you know deep down are true, then feel free to book a session. So look forward to hearing from you. And the people, as I said, that I did the masterclass for loved it and thought it was really helpful. So looking forward to hearing from you if you would like to delve into your human design. And the way that it fits into what I do, as you know, I have my signature Thrive AF method, which is taking you on a journey from foundations to first to freedom. And this fits into the freedom part. So when you have stopped drinking for a little bit and you're starting to really think about what next and who are you now in your new alcohol-free identity. So maybe when you're a couple of months in, you may want to think about your human design, as that will help you really understand yourself better to then be able to think about things like, how do you manage and process emotions? How do you think about what your core values are? What are your goals? What does that look like? Where are you now versus where do you want to go? What do you visualize as your big dream? Where do you want to be in 6 months to a year? And so we look at all those things through the freedom part of the Thrive AF method. And of course, if you are also just looking to understand yourself better and you're not necessarily alcohol free, then human design will still be beneficial, but maybe it will set you on a path to becoming alcohol free. So I hope that's helpful. And as I said, if you'd like to find out more or you'd like to download your chart or book a session, feel free to get in touch. thrivealcoholfree.com/human design. Okay, so today's guest is Jessica. Jessica Guerrieri is a writer and a novelist and lives in Northern California with her husband and 3 daughters. She loves the ocean, her Peloton, and finding outlets for creativity. And her award-winning debut book club fiction novel, Between the Devil and the Deep Blue Sea, will be available from May 2025. And so we talk a lot about her book. We talk about her alcohol-free journey and what led her to become alcohol-free. And we talk about some other books that she has in the pipeline as well. So I hope you enjoy this conversation with Jessica. And it just reminds me of something else that I did this week, which was I was a guest on the Get Literate podcast. And I think that's coming out next week. And we had such a fun conversation because I was talking about my 3 favorite mocktails. And Stephanie, who is the podcast host, she actually paired those mocktails with books for the summer. So if you're looking for summer reads, head to her podcast, the Get Literate podcast. And as I said, the episode will be out next Tuesday, and it was lots of fun to record it. So if you would like a slightly different take on what I do, and as you know, I'm also a judge on the World Alcohol Free Awards for alcohol-free drinks. But this was just a really fun conversation. So feel free to check that out when that's out next week. Okay, well, without further ado, here is the episode with Jessica. So welcome, Jessica. How are you today?
I'm so good. It's so great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, not at all. It's lovely that you're here. So I think what you're doing is really exciting. And I know you've got a good following on Instagram, but you're also a full-time author. So I would love maybe for the people that don't know you to just introduce yourself and tell them what's brought you to being on the Thrive Alcohol Free podcast.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's still so fun for me to hear that I'm a full-time author. I have diaries starting when I was 6 where it was like, I want to grow up to be a writer. And it's like, I grew up to be a writer.
Oh, so
um,
amazing.
so let's see. I live in Northern California. I am the mom to 3 incredible daughters that are 10, 8, and 5. I am happily married to my husband. We met at UC Davis, and that's currently where we live. It is a really wonderful life. I decided during the pandemic that I was going to chase my goal of attempting to write a fiction book. And I'd always dabbled in writing. I started a mom blog, so to get out there and practice normalizing these thoughts that I was having in motherhood. I struggled with postpartum depression, and I really wanted to sort of vocalize what was going on and find out if other women were feeling this way. Turns out a lot of women were feeling that way. And then I realized I have this ability to be able to articulate things that many people, especially women, mothers, people in recovery, have experienced, and I can put it into words. And so I wanted to do that in a fictionalized form of what an experience of the darkest parts of addiction will look like for a full-time mom, and the ability for it to sneak up on you and you to be in it and not know how to get out of it, because I'm very familiar with that feeling. Yeah, so the name of my novel is Between the Devil and the Deep Blue Sea, and it's coming out in May of 2025, being published by Harper Muse. And so it's a peek behind the curtain into what happens with the repercussions of mommy wine culture and really the dark, ugly truth of what it looks like. And so, yeah, I'm really excited for that.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I'm sure it would be hugely successful. So I'm excited for you. So from your perspective, because obviously that's based on fiction, it's a fictional book, but from your perspective, you stopped drinking 11 years ago, didn't you? And
I did.
so, yeah, why don't you tell us a little bit about what led you to, because that was quite, 11 years is a long time, and it probably
It is a
wasn't
long
trendy to be
time.
alcohol free then. So I'd
No,
love
and
to hear a bit
not when
about
you're
that.
29 either. No, not when you're 29, newly married, fresh out of grad school. Yeah, so my sort of rock bottom, I guess, was pretty ordinary in the sense of I always joke like they're not going to make like a lifetime movie about it, of the dramatics of the end of it all. I did have some pretty scary things happen at the end. So I'm a special ed teacher originally, and I was really struggling to cope with the stressors and anxieties of what it meant to work in a classroom with kids with emotional and mental challenges. And so what was happening over time is my drink when I got home was just getting like a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger. And I was telling myself, because of all the hard work that I was doing and all the effort that I was putting into my students, that it was okay that my drink was getting bigger because I had earned it, right? Like I was worthy of it. And if you had my stressful job where children were climbing on the roof and running out into traffic, you would be drinking too. And so I justified it, right? As we do. And I was young, I was in my mid 20s, and I lacked the coping skills to be able to cope in a healthy way of the stressors, right? And so alcohol was the quick, easiest solution and the thing that made everything else quiet inside my head. And so I would have moments where I couldn't wait. I mean, the thing about teaching is it's not even 5 o'clock when you get home. It's 3:30 or 4:30 sometimes. So that's when my happy hour could start. And they even have happy hours for teachers, and they encourage you to go and do that as your reward system. Think about how many teachers are gifted bottles of wine at the end of the year and like, I'm sorry for my child, here's a bottle of wine. It's just this messaging that we're giving of like, here is your reward. And I drank it all up as we do. And so I hit a point where it was spring break and I decided to get drunk and paint my house as you do. And I had just gotten a pedicure. And so I wanted to wear socks and I didn't want the paint to drip onto my feet. Again, these are the things that the insanity of where we're at, right? I had to protect the toes. And so I climbed on a chair to paint a pie. And in doing so, I slipped off it and I twisted my knee and I ended up blacking out because I tore my knee in 3 different places. And I came to, and my knee was 5 times its normal size. I didn't know what happened. I had to call my sister in law, and she called my husband. We had to go to the emergency room. And then there, they proceeded to give me pain pills, which I abused, on top of the alcohol, on top of the anti anxiety medication that I was taking for my stressful job. Never mind that anti anxiety medication does not work when you take it with 3 bottles of wine a night or even a glass of wine. It's not doing what it's supposed to be doing because it's counteracting everything that the SSRIs are doing for us, right?
Mm.
So, none of this knowledge at the time, but basically my rock bottom came with all of those series of events. And I was very lucky in that I had a moment of profound clarity and I woke up. I had humiliated myself the evening before. It was like a family dinner. And I looked to see if my husband was sleeping next to me because that was always the barometer of if I had embarrassed him or embarrassed myself. And I checked to see if he was mad at me because, of course, I couldn't remember. Luckily, he was there that time, but I went to the guest bathroom down the hall because that's where was my ritual of making myself throw up before I went to go teach. And I would need to throw up in the vanity with the sink because I had had so much experience of throwing up in the toilet and the toilet water splashing on my face. And so I learned to perfect it by throwing up into the sink and having water go so that my husband couldn't hear that I was throwing up. And again, the insanity loop that we go on of like, oh, it's normal because I just needed to make sure that the water was running so that it would go down the sink. none of this processing in my head that that's actually insane, that I was poisoning myself to the point of being that sick. And then I just had this moment of profound clarity that I couldn't really understand until I got sober. That was like an otherworldly voice that was like, haven't you had enough yet? And I had had enough. And so I walked out of the bathroom. I found my husband and said, I think I have a problem with drinking. And he said, oh my God, I'm so relieved you finally said it. Well, he was waiting for me to come forward. He had always known what was happening and he wasn't enabling it, but he was definitely like scared and worried, but wasn't threatening about anything. He just was waiting for me to come to the decision that I needed to stop. I come from a family where we have people with long-term recovery in my family. And so luckily I knew that there was 12-step programs and answers to where I could go. And so that's exactly what I did. And I never looked back. So that was on May 2nd of 2013 when I was 29. And then 30 days into that, I found out I was pregnant. We had been trying to get pregnant because I wanted to be a mom more than anything. Obviously, I love children. And we couldn't get pregnant. And that was only because of the amount that I was drinking. And obviously, it was such a blessing because I'm not sure that I would have stopped drinking. I know that I wouldn't have stopped drinking. I would have continued to excuse the behavior, either drinking through pregnancy or definitely when my girls were older, had I not made the statement that I think I have a problem, acknowledging the problem, and then also going public with the problem as it related to my friends and family, and having them hold me accountable and saying, I need you to recognize that if I say I can drink again, I actually can't. And that was scary, right? That's a very scary thing to say. But again, it was this moment of clarity, and I needed to just shout it from the rooftops. And ever since then, everybody in my life would know if I had a glass of wine in my hand, something is very wrong, and they would be there to hold me accountable. And I need that. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing and
Yeah.
being so open. And 29 is still pretty young to come to
Yeah.
that realization. It's quite impressive, actually, especially
Thank
11
you.
years ago, because I imagine 11 years ago, I'd love to hear your perspective. So I stopped drinking 3.5 years ago, and it feels that in the past probably couple of years, it's definitely become more in everyone's
Normalized.
face, normalized, with all the influencers on Instagram and people talking about it a bit more and people actually promoting a healthy lifestyle, and at least for our generation. But then you've also got the younger generation that are saying, I don't need to drink, I don't want to drink. They're making
Right.
the different choices. So what was it like 11 years ago when you came to that realization? And did your husband drink at all, or was he not a drinker?
Yes. So my husband is what we call like a normie. He can drink like regular people. I'm like, what's that like? And so he was very supportive when I was newly in recovery. And so he wouldn't have alcohol in the house. And he was super respectful of that. Now it's a non issue. I can go anywhere, do anything. We can have alcohol in the house. It's not an issue at all. But he's also very aware and very supportive that if I ever came to him and was like, no, I think I can start drinking again, he would be like, nope. So while he tries to understand and wants to and is as supportive as he possibly can be, he doesn't really understand the mindset of where I'm at because I'll go to him sometimes and I'll be like, the kids are making me crazy. Today would be a day that I would feel like checking out. And he'll nod in understanding and say, okay, well, why don't you go for a run, or I'll take the kids, and understand that. But he doesn't know what that mental weight feels like. And then 11 years ago, it definitely wasn't like a cool thing to be doing, right? It was more of I was very lucky that I recognized that I couldn't sort of tiptoe into sobriety. It was an all or nothing. And ironically, how I learned about that was through Dr. Drew and Celebrity Rehab, and that narrative through reality TV, which is my addiction of choice at the moment, learning that there's no half measures, right? You don't just get to have a sip of champagne at someone's wedding. And so I think a lot of people, and especially me at 29, having that mentality of all or nothing has been really beneficial for me when it comes to all my goals and my attitude about my future, my career, my writing. I put that to heart with everything that I do. So I'm not just writing a book. I got a 2-book deal with a big 5 publishing house. I go get them.
Amazing.
I go all the way in, and that's what I do with my full heart. So I I knew that for me, that's what I needed to do. And that was the difference, I think, between staying sober and thinking I could dabble and go back and forth. Because I know a lot of people relapse is part of their recovery story, right? It's a back and forth. I don't know that I have like another recovery in me. I'm too terrified to find out. So I'll just stay away completely. And that's only with the perspective of 11 years. Yeah, it's a different time in that social media wasn't what it was back then, but we did see all over the place. And I know I had to give myself a timeout. People living their best drinking lives on social
Mm.
media. And I just remember crying and scrolling through and Facebook and just being, look at this person having a glass of wine outside while their kids play nearby. I want that life. I want that ability to check out. And I had so much envy because I genuinely thought that was the better way to live. And not to sound condescending or sort of putting me on a higher level than anyone else. I just know now that is not true. The clarity and the happiness that I have is untainted, it's unaltered by anything. And so it's there in the purest form, and it actually exists in me as opposed to the superficial thing that I'm seeking outside of myself. So that's where I feel incredibly lucky. And that's only come really in the last 5, 6 years as I've gotten my bearings of being a mom, being sober, post pandemic. It comes with time. But yeah, right now I'm in this really magical sweet spot of like, oh, look at me doing all my dreams and having everything come true.
Oh, that's amazing. And so I think hopefully for the person listening, it's so inspiring as well, isn't
Thank
it? That
you.
actually by making that decision. And I love the fact that you said it was like an otherworldly voice that said, haven't you had enough? And so many of us have had that knowing or that deep sense that something beyond us has said,
Right.
or whispered, maybe shouted in the end, whatever
Right.
it is, that actually by doing this one thing, it could change everything, or it could give you everything that you've
Absolutely.
been wanting.
Absolutely. And I love that. And I was having this conversation with someone recently who was talking about has always talked about their relationship with alcohol and sort of checked in with me from time to time with this knowing in their background that something is amiss. And again, I would be my own worst enemy at 28 when I was about to get
Mm,
sober. Someone like me, I would avoid like the plague, right? Because I'm very scary
mm,
promoting sobriety. That's not a real thing. Get away from me. I don't want to hear your message. That's too much. But this person I was talking to, they said something really telling recently, and I wanted to share it because it brought me right back into the thought process of, did we know at the time? She kept saying, I'm not worried about where I'm at. I'm not worried about it.
mm,
And it got me thinking, were you worried when you were at your darkest time?
mm,
Because my brain told me not to be worried. There's nothing to be
mm,
worried about. This is
mm,
normal. Everything's fine. The house is on
mm,
fire, but we're fine because it
mm,
wanted to perpetuate the drinking cycle, right? It wanted to do it at all costs. So the message that I want to say with the clarity that I have of 11 years is that, of course, you're not worried, but then aren't you? Because we're having this conversation. There is a knowing, there is
mm,
something happening in your brain if you have to say, I'm not worried 5 times in the period of a minute, right? I don't know.
agree. I
What
would
is your
agree.
thought on that? Because
I would
were
agree.
you
Yeah.
worried about yourself? Would you let yourself be worried, or was your I don't know if you call it a disease. I
No,
call it a disease. Like, was
no,
your
I don't
disease
call it a
tricking you
disease.
into believing everything was fine?
No, so I've got a slightly different perspective, but no, I don't call it a disease. And
Okay.
for me, it had got to the point where I wasn't enjoying alcohol. So I'd gone through my 20s and 30s and enjoyed myself and loved it. And about 2 years prior to that, I realized I wasn't able to drink the heavy red wines that I could, just wasn't able to
Hmm.
process it, couldn't drink them. So then went on to the lighter red wines and then went on to the white wines and then
Sure.
looked at other things that had less alcohol. But then probably for a year or so before I stopped, I kept getting this sense that why are you doing it?
Right.
What's the purpose? And I think I realized it was one, a habit, and my brain was
Mm,
certainly saying you need to just keep doing that habit
right.
because that's what you do.
This is devil,
Two, again, the stressful job, and
Mhm.
I realized again in hindsight that I never thought I was anxious. So maybe you talk about worried, I was probably thinking I'm not anxious, I'm not anxious.
Totally.
But actually I think I was quite anxious, and obviously alcohol exacerbates anxiety, stress, depression, and I
Right.
probably was quite stressed, and
Mm,
there were certain things that were probably there from an alcohol perspective that I was denying or
sure.
not equating the two. And I think that a lot of us, myself included, I was the one that was always saying, if I met people that didn't drink, I'd be like, well, why not? Surely you can have
Right.
one. I'd be the one
Right.
pushing alcohol onto people, and I would feel insecure about that because obviously it's a reflection on me. So
Right.
we all know this now in hindsight.
Right. But you can't
Um,
see it. Yeah, you
but
can't
you
see it
can't
when
see
you're
it at the
lost
time.
in it. And
Yeah.
that's where my hope is with my novel and with my writing and with these conversations that we're having, is that when you're stuck inside of it and you can't
Mm,
see it, you hear these messages
mm,
that will sort of infiltrate at the right moments at the right time, and then that will be the thing that will take hold and get you to the point of acceptance and realizing, like, oh, this alcohol is not serving me in my life at
yes.
all. You talk about anxiety, like, even just meeting you, I would
Mm.
say we're probably some of the calmest people that you can meet. You can tell other people's energy even via Zoom or whatever. And if you met me 11 years ago, I could have lit myself on fire. I was
Mm.
so wrapped in this tightness of pressure and worry and fear. And
Mm.
now that's just not how I
Yeah.
live anymore. And the weight of that, the emotional freedom of it, I wish that for anyone that is thinking that the price is so heavy to give it up, I'm like, the price is so heavy to continue.
Yeah. I always say you're not giving anything up, you're only gaining. And I
Ugh,
absolutely
so
think you
true.
gain so much by ditching this one thing opens the doors for everything.
It's so true. It's so true. And I feel really lucky because I have a group of girlfriends, and for my 10-year sobriety anniversary, we all went to Mexico and we did yoga at sunset. And Mexico, a lot of people think, oh, tequila. The shuttle that arrived to come get us, to bring us to the Airbnb, he had tequila in the car for us. And we're like, no, we're here celebrating a sobriety birthday. And everybody that was there was a few that were sober, but then there were a few that just aren't heavy drinkers. And nobody chose to drink on that trip because we didn't have any desire. We were all
Mm.
so high on life and enjoying each other's company that it didn't even factor in. And so these are the type of people that I choose to surround myself with. And those type of people do exist, where it's like, whether you have a problem with drinking, whether you choose not to drink, or
Mhm.
whatever it looks like. I think a lot of people think it's an either or. Oh, they're the heavy drinkers and everybody just drinks all the time. I've learned that that's just simply not true. There is this world of people out there that don't necessarily call themselves an alcoholic, but they're just like, oh no, I don't like it. I don't like how I feel. I don't like,
Mm.
and I've learned to find those people and run towards them because
Mhm.
I'm like, yes, I relate to this.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. They say that's the best habit, the habit of choosing the people that you surround yourself with, because the five people that you spend the most time with are who you become.
Right.
And again, I look back and a lot of people that I knew, the thing we had in common was we would go for a glass of wine
Oh,
on
of
a
course.
Thursday, or we'd do this,
Of
and that
course.
was our thing. And then actually, when I stopped drinking, I'm probably not talking to those people anymore, because
Right.
you suddenly
Very
think, what
true.
else do I do other than
Right.
go to a bar? I don't
Well,
know if
you
that's what you
surround
found.
yourself people with that normalize that type of behavior too, right? I
Yeah,
actually a
exactly.
lot of the roommates that I had in college and everything, several of them have actually come back and said that they no longer drink. But we would one up each other of who could drink more. And you perpetuate that cycle of toxic behavior where you're just like, oh no, this is normal. It's totally fine to drink this because you're doing it. And also, this person is worse than me. Therefore, I'm not as bad. And then you can put yourself into a category that's safer and feels safer. And yeah, so that's the company you keep a lot of times, especially in the momming wine culture. There are these pockets of moms that normalize the idea of like book clubs where instead of reading the book, you're getting drunk on wine together and you never even open the book. And that's just the way that it is, which is why I chose to write book club fiction because I wanted to enter the belly of the beast from the jump because I knew that
Mm.
there was going to be a woman that is sitting around drinking wine and
Mm.
reading this book and finding similarities in my main character's habits. And actually, that was how I first felt safe to identify my problematic drinking was through a fictionalized character where I said, huh, it isn't normal to really enjoy drinking by myself. I didn't
Mm.
realize that. Okay, that's just a spark I'm going to put into my brain. I can't deal with that right now, but I have a
Mm.
feeling I need to examine that a little bit more. And so my hope is that women will use that, and especially that camaraderie and safe space that you create in book clubs and women's groups where you can actually have those like hard conversations and be like, huh, did anybody else feel like this is a little bit speaking to you in a way that
Mm.
kind of makes you nervous? And then you have a way to communicate that with other people in a safe place.
Yeah, and I think that's so great. It's helpful to hear stories and to
Yeah.
actually think, I have a choice. Because again, I think a lot of people, one, don't give themselves permission, maybe, or don't even
Hmm.
think they have the choice to say, I'm not going to drink. And to
Right.
your point earlier, you said something about women, especially
Right.
becoming more addicted to it or not
Right.
realizing they had a problem, and then realizing actually over time it does
Right.
get worse. And again, that's because ultimately alcohol is an addictive substance, and so
Right.
regardless of where you start, where you come from, whatever, if you drink enough of it, you're going to become addicted to it. But with your book, I'd love you to maybe just give us a bit of a précis of the book and what people can expect when it comes out, because it sounds fascinating. I'm sure just hearing about it will prick some people's ears today who are listening. So why don't you tell us a bit about the book?
Yeah. So the name of the book again is Between the Devil and the Deep Blue Sea. And it's told through the first person perspective of a woman named Leah, and she lives in the Half Moon Bay community, which is actually a real town, a coastal town that I grew up going to every weekend. It's just this beautiful little charming community in the Northern California coastline. And at first she's sort of this like bohemian surfer, free spirit, while she always kind of feels this edge, something pulling at her that she's unsure of. And then she meets someone and he has the stability of a very close knit family. And so she gets pulled into that and then adopts the motherhood lifestyle and finds herself drowning inside the motherhood lifestyle. Motherhood just continues to be hard. And then she recognizes this phantom life that's always haunted her of the what if, like, I could have gone this direction, but I went this direction. And really, what we see inside active addiction is the things that you're trying to get pulled out of. It's really just like your own demons. It's all the hard things that you're trying to escape from. It's the crying child that won't take a nap anymore. It's the lunches that you have to make. And it's this idea of, I don't know if I want this life, or I don't know how to accept this life, and so I'm going to check out of it. And then how that is manifested inside the idea that women are encouraged to check out. I mean, that is the narrative, right? You see memes and social media that's the back to school aisle and it's the wine aisle and pointing to it of just this promotion of that narrative that this is the solution. Here's the solution, and we're pointing to it. And then, really, because I lived it and I survived it, I wanted to show what the actual darkness of active alcoholism looks like while being a mom and the dangerousness and the slippery slope, as you said. And then ultimately, my message and who I am as a person and my story has always been one of hope. And so I portray that as well. And yeah, I'm super excited. I think the themes will resonate whether people have experience with alcoholism or not. It's really the idea of escapism as a whole, and playing with that theme that no matter if you're a mom, if you're a woman in the world, you'll understand what it means to want to check outside of yourself when stuff gets hard. And so hopefully it'll resonate with a lot of women in that way.
Yeah, congratulations. I think it sounds fab. I can't wait to read it. And so I'll have to have
Thank
you on when it
you.
officially comes out as well, and we can
Absolutely.
talk a
Yeah, I
bit more
can't wait to
about
share it.
it. Yeah, okay. And I love what you said about yours has always been a story of hope. Do you want to elaborate on that a bit? Because I think that's
Yeah.
just a wonderful phrase.
Thank you. I again 12 years ago, that would have turned my stomach. It's the grateful alcoholic people, or, oh, I have so much gratitude, or whatever it is. It's just like eye rolling. If you met me, and I'm actually not full of it, this is actually how I feel through a lot of work, right? It hasn't
Mm.
always been hearts and stars and rainbows and all of that, but it's an earned hope because technically speaking, I should not be here. We shouldn't be having this conversation.
Mm.
There were so many nights where I accidentally took too many sleeping pills on top of I forgot that I took a sleeping pill and then I drank more. I shouldn't have woken up many, many times. And that wasn't because I wanted to die, it was because I did not know how to live. And so now that I do know how to live, I'm living my best life. My friends and I are going to Mexico next week to go celebrate my 2 book deal because last year we celebrated my 10-year sobriety anniversary and we had the best time. Let's do it again. Oh, and also you sold your books. Let's celebrate you. Who gets to do that? Right? Not the person that I was when I was tearing my knee and blacking out every 5 minutes. I get to do these things because I'm present. I work really hard for them. It's not always easy, but I want to show the other side of this. If you had a dream, what was standing in the way of it? My drinking was standing in the way of my dream. And I removed the alcohol and then I went for my dream and I got it. I'm getting it.
Mm. Yeah, such a fab message. And
Thanks.
I always talk about gratitude and hope and all of those good things and joy. And yeah, it's funny because I talk about that quite naturally now, but to your point,
Right.
probably didn't and would have been the eye
No.
roller, you know, just like, yeah, whatever.
Lots
But
of eyes.
it's so true, so well said. Okay, so you have the book coming out, and we've touched a lot on mummy wine culture, and since 2020, there have been lots of statistics out there that women have been drinking more than they were. Women are actually getting more illnesses and potentially dying as well from alcohol related illnesses. So there was a real shift. And I think there's always been this thing where alcohol's been pushed on women. That certainly probably started in the 90s. I remember we had Ladettes in this country, which is all about drinking pints of beer and keeping up with the men. And then we also had Sex in the City come out and
Right.
Cosmos and that whole glamorous side of drinking. And so that's what we grew up with. And over the years, when you go to the store and you look for a birthday card for your mum or for your friend, there's a wine glass or a bottle of wine or something on the card. And to your point with memes and the rest of it. But 2020 seemed to shift the perspective of people, and actually people did reach for that because that was a coping mechanism. So I'd love to hear a bit about what you saw during that time, and as a non-drinker at that time, how did you cope with it all?
Sure. Yeah. So 2020, I looked back because I've had to do research for my memoir as it relates to statistics and things like that. And I think it was a 400% increase in alcohol sales. And then the percentage of women's alcohol abuse also skyrocketed, especially with young mothers at home. And for the first time, too, we were being told, like, that's totally fine. In a very real life is too hard. It's too hard. Here, there is no 5 o'clock. It's 5 o'clock everywhere. So go ahead and do that. And my thought process on that was interesting because I decided that I was going to dabble in substances other than alcohol during the pandemic to check to see, like, oh, am I really a full blown addict? Am I an alcoholic? I identify as these terms and I understand other people do not. And I totally respect that. Again, that was also a new thing for me in the pandemic. I became open to the idea of sober curiosity without someone having a disease, of just being like, oh, this is a different way of living. It didn't occur to me, but I started looking into other narratives and literature that was like, let's talk about it in a non-scary way. Because a lot of times you hear alcoholic or something and you're like, I've already checked out. That sounds like a crazy person or whatever it is. Let's not use that language then. Use whatever you want.
Mm.
And so what I ended up doing was I was experimenting with forms with THC and I was abusing it. And it's legal here in California. And I could just drive up during the pandemic and they just bring it to my minivan. And I ended up overdosing, which you can do on THC, in case
Mm.
anybody was curious.
Mm.
And I had a full blown panic attack hallucination. I was tripping to the point of I didn't know what reality was. And in that trip and psychosis, my brother-in-law came over because I didn't feel my children were safe, even though it was midnight and they were asleep. And I just needed another adult. My husband was there. I didn't trust that it was my husband. It was full sheer panic. I've never been so terrified in my life. And what ended up happening is the next day, I realized I was back in active addiction. I was back in the cycle again. And I remember crying and calling my sister and saying, it got me. It got me again. I can't believe it. Here I thought I was outsmarting it, right? I was outsmarting the whole thing. But I was being told the message and it was going inside my ear and I was reading it on social media all day long of you are supposed to escape this. You are supposed to get out of this. This reality is too horrible to exist in. So it's okay that you're doing this. It's okay. I at the time had a 18-month-old, a 4-year-old and a 5-year-old. And it was dark. It was really dark here. It was very, very challenging. We were also in the middle of the California wildfires, so we couldn't go outside. We couldn't breathe the air, and we were scared of COVID, and it was all the things. And I was like, well, this is the end, right? So this is the doomsday approach that I'm being told. So I might as well try all my options. So once I realized that, okay, I also identify as an addict, I can't take any substance in a healthy way that's good for me. So I no longer do anything. And what I learned in that process, because of the messaging out there, is I actually love Dax Shepard's podcast, Armchair Expert. And he shared that he had relapsed using pills. He's also an alcoholic and identifies his sobriety. And he had the same exact experience. And what I did was, as sneaky as I am, I decided to write an article that was published in Scary Mommy and other mom blogs that was sort of hiding in plain sight, where I said Dax Shepard's relapse was saving my sobriety because here I knew I couldn't drink again and I wasn't drinking again. Never mind that I was doing something else. But look at me, look how amazing I am at being sober during this really hard time. And I was pointing all the fingers because that's what you do. You're calling out for help, you're screaming at the top of your lungs, waving your hands over your head. Because for me, if I'm drawing attention to it, nobody's going to pay attention. I can hide in that way. So then come to realize, of course, I did exactly what he did. Exactly. We can't take anything safely. And so I had to come clean about that. And then that was when I decided to publicly come out as a sober woman, a proud sober woman, a proud person in recovery. And I used the experience of the pandemic to help normalize the feelings that everybody now could feel, which were the feelings of isolation and hopelessness and worry and fear. And these are all feelings that people who struggle with substances are all very used to feeling, but now it's a universal feeling. Do you want to know what it's like to be enclosed in a space that you can't get out of, that you can't change no matter how much you want to change it? Well, welcome to what it's like to be somebody with a substance problem. And so I decided to just shift the whole narrative and say, hey, now everybody can feel what we felt, and like recognize these as human emotions. And so that's when I turned it into writing, and that's when I turned it into a book.
Amazing story. And now I remember that shepherd, and I remember that story as well. It's really interesting, and I share this with clients and people with anything, regardless of what you're addicted to. You are either trying to create a feeling or escape from a feeling,
Right.
and that's all it is. And whatever is your thing, you are using that to numb your emotions.
Right.
And for alcohol specifically, it numbs obviously all the negative emotions and all those feelings that you talked about: hopelessness, worry, isolation,
Mhm.
fear. It does numb those, but it also then
Mhm.
numbs your positive emotions as
Right.
well, so you don't actually get to feel the joy and the hope and the things we were talking about earlier that we roll our eyes at, because
Right.
you're on this level that your emotions just aren't really there, because you're just numbing yourself. And I wonder what conclusion you've come to in terms of, we all look outside of ourselves for all these different things, but what's the real truth, Jessica?
Right. Well, if I had that, I mean, it's a constant thing, but a work in progress. But I do know exactly what you just said of we were numbing out all the good too. And now I get to actually experience the true highs that are as pure as they could possibly be, because the call is coming from inside the house, right? So I think that is the answer, is that you can seek it in love and sex and food and alcohol. Those are all external
Mm,
solutions. If you're not happy within yourself, if you're not satisfied in your role as a mother, as a wife, as a partner, or whatever it is, you're going to continue to seek outside to try and escape that feeling. So it's this, I don't want to say self-acceptance is the answer, but there
mm,
has to be a level of peace that you find
mm,
within yourself that allows you to be enough. It has to be enough at a certain point.
mm,
And I think women are the ones that are the most vulnerable to this, because we are constantly being told that we are not enough.
mm. Yeah.
And I'm just as guilty of it. I'm raising 3 daughters, and in this world, that's very intimidating. I have to show them certain things, that I'm a good person. And how am I a good person? I'm like, well, I give back to the recovery community. Okay, well, what does that mean? And I have to show them these things, as opposed to the messaging that we're currently being bombarded with. And so, yeah, I hate to say it, but it comes from the satisfaction from within.
Mm. That's absolutely true. You do need to get to that point. It's not easy though, is it? It is
No, I mean, no. And I can say this after being in recovery from every type of affliction that you can possibly have, every form of
Mm,
escapism you can try, be it food and drugs and alcohol. I've tried it
mm,
all. And at the end of the
mm.
day, everywhere you go, there you are, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I don't know if you've read the book Worthy by Jamie Kern-Lima, and
Mm-mm.
she starts by giving a load of statistics. 91% of women don't like their body, don't like something about their body. 80% of women don't feel that they're worthy or that they're good enough. 75% of corporate execs women have experienced imposter syndrome. It just
Right.
feels like it's absolutely ingrained in women to feel a certain way and to not feel enough in some way. And I think men as well. She had a statistical men, and that was a lot higher than I expected. Men have the same feelings as well. So
Interesting.
it does feel like that probably is what starts all of these, let's look outside of ourselves, because we
Hmm.
just don't innately feel worthy.
Right.
And I had someone on the podcast the other day, and he was a bloke, and he was talking about those things. And so it was
Hmm.
fascinating to hear. And I do think we have to do a lot of work. And that's why with my coaching method, we start with the foundation and the first, which is all about the ditching drinking and then getting through the first, finding new habits and hobbies and passions that you can turn to. But
Right.
it's the freedom piece that's really is what sets you up for life, because that's where you start to think about managing, processing emotions, thinking about your values, thinking about who you are as a person. I do that through
Mm-hmm.
human design. And then you also then think about, okay, so where am I? What are my goals? What areas of my life do I want to improve on? And then what's my big vision? And so that's really moving through. You've done the drinking thing's gone, but
Right.
it's the what next, and how do you then get to the point where you can actually start to see that it is more about what's inside of you as opposed to what's outside of you.
Absolutely. If you think about it too, it's very telling that my favorite activity and my darkest moment was me getting drunk by myself. And what does that tell you? It's that I did not want to be alone with myself.
Yeah,
And now if I can be alone, like, whew, that's amazing. I relish in it, right? And
yeah,
so that's where I think the crux of everything comes into play. Can you sit peacefully alone within yourself? That's the art of meditation and yoga and things like that, where
yeah,
it's like, no, that makes people like very deeply uncomfortable.
yeah.
And I was one of them. I was like, oh my God, what are we doing? We're sitting in our thoughts. My thoughts were the scariest place I could possibly live, was inside my own head. And then I realized, well, what is safer? What could be safer? And for me, my thoughts turned into writing, which it had always been, but I wasn't sober enough to be able to write. And so it, it turned into, oh, I have a place to put these things. And so you talked about passion and what is your thing? And I said, my thing will be writing. And that is what I went after. And I know that everybody says those things of like chase your dreams and do all of that. And I want to be a story of proof, right? That I'm not just saying these things, because I'm actually living it. And I want to show that to my daughters, and I want to show that to other women, that this is what action looks like.
I love that. I love that.
Thanks.
Well, thank you. And I wonder, so what next? So do you want to tell us briefly about what else is coming up in your life?
Sh- Sure. Yeah. So I got a 2-book deal with Harper Collins, Harper
Yeah,
Muse, which
congratulations.
is
That's really impressive. That's
amazing.
amazing. First
Again,
time author.
just to like just fun. It is very hard to just get an agent. I have so many friends out in the writing community. The writing community is very similar to the sober community in that everybody is just so welcoming and warm and wonderful. And so I feel like I hit the jackpot, where it's like, oh, I get these two communities, especially of women, where we just embrace each other and lift each other up. But it's also really hard because it's a really tough business. And that's the other piece of this too, where I had to deal with criticism to the point of the ridiculous. My book was rejected 90 different times with various different rejections. And that's because all writing is subjective. And also, I'm opening myself up to critique. And what other job do you have where people rate you with stars and like, oh, nope, that person is a 1 star? And so the strength that I had to have of character to get to the point to be, well, I'm putting it out there. The world can do with it what they will. They can like me, they can not like me. They can rate it, they can share it or not. I have to accept that. That is other people's choice to make. So I needed to get to that place in order to continue on chasing my dream. And it was a work in progress, because I thought my first draft, I was like, this is the next New York Times bestseller, because my ego, right? And it was very humbling to get to that place. So once I actually did the work, and it took years, and getting an agent and going out on submission and getting the 2-book deal. And then since that, it's been an incredible whirlwind. The publishing process is a long process. From the time we signed, it was over 18 months between that moment and when it's going to be on bookshelves. But there's so much work that's happening behind the scenes that's so fun. I'm writing the back cover copy right now, which is when people go to bookstores and you flip it over on the back and it's like, what is this about? And we're doing the cover, and just the imaging of the cover and seeing it is makes me burst out into tears, because talk about seeing your dream in real life in front of you and having that come to life. And then I'm working on my second novel, which is about sort of the community of women that we've built in the post-pandemic world, and how we've really relied on each other, especially in motherhood, and sort of what that has meant for marriages as a whole, because men didn't necessarily have those same resources and tools that women had of like leaning on each other. And so that was more of an emotional burden for women to carry. And that's had repercussions on a lot of marriages. And so, what does it look like to stay, to get divorced, to have an open marriage, to explore other things? And really, ultimately, the foundation of the community of women and how we come together is really the messaging of that book. And then my memoir is currently out on submission because we are very much hoping to sell that in between. So the timing of it will work out that Between the Devil and the Deep Blue Sea will come out in May of next year. My memoir will be in bookshelves right after that. And then 6 months later, my second fiction novel will be out as well. So fingers crossed, if everything goes according to plan, I will have 3 books out by 2026.
Amazing,
Yeah.
amazing. So we should all watch this space, because it's been
Yes.
on the podcast and we'll all go, wow, this is now a massive author that we've had on. So no, I'm
I
excited
I
for
I
you.
hope so, but yes, 100%. That's the dream, but it's really an honor to be here speaking with you.
Well, thank you for being on. And how can people find you?
Yeah, so the best way is on Instagram, and I'm at Jessica Guerrieri, spelled Guerrieri, author. At Jessica Guerrieri Author on Instagram is the best way. And you can also find me I have jessicaguerrieri.net is my website, and that has also all of my up-to-date information. As soon as we are on pre-ordering and everything like that, which is coming up in the next few months, pre-ordering is just, and I'm learning all of these new things too as a new author. Pre-ordering is the only way that you can become a New York Times bestseller right out of the gate. And so they look at those lists, and that's why pre-ordering is so important. And
Mm.
so I will be plugging that really hard as soon as I can. And of course, supporting local bookstores is the best way. We have one in my town that has been incredible, and I will be doing a book tour all over. So all of that will be on my website. It'll be promoted on my Instagram. And yeah, you'll be able to find me.
Oh, so exciting. So exciting. Gosh, you've got a busy year or so coming up then, haven't
I
you? It's going to be a
really
whirlwind.
do. I really do. It's
Yeah.
going to be really fun.
Brilliant, brilliant. So, with everyone, I always end the podcast with asking, what does thriving alcohol-free mean to you? And I think we could probably guess the answer, but I'd love to hear what you have to say, Jessica.
It's such a good question. And I love that you ask people this because to me, it hits on exactly what we talked about, which is the hope and the joy. When I think of thriving, I think it was Kaiser that used that word as their pitch, which is a healthcare initiative here. And thriving is such a beautiful description of it, because anyone that either knows me now, knew me, I guess what I call like my past life, they find me and they say, "It's so wonderful to see you thriving." And
Mm.
thriving is genuinely living the best, happiest, most authentic version of yourself. I wore so many hats and did so many disguises, and I had to be this manipulative version of myself in order to perpetuate my ability to be able to drink. But now I will show up anywhere, any place, and everybody knows who I am. They know who is going to show up. And that to me is the greatest gift, because not only that, I'm proud of who I am. I get to show that for my daughters. The happiness and the sadness and the hard times, they are authentic feelings that I'm experiencing, and that is part of the thriving, right? It's not all butterflies and puppies, even though we just got a puppy. Uh, she's on my lap right now.
Exciting.
Of course, I also have a puppy just to add to
Oh,
the happiness of life, but is those things without alcohol. And it took a while to get to that joy part, to get to that thriving part. And I think what scares a lot of people, and what scared me in the early days, is that it wasn't amazing in the beginning, right? It was really hard. And so it was like, oh, I could just go back to the whatever it was before because this is worse. It takes time to get to the place. But again, I'm living proof of the other side of it. Absolutely none of this would be possible if alcohol was still in my life. I would have none of these dreams, including my children.
It's such an amazing story.
Thank you.
Just so grateful for you for being on and sharing it so vulnerably and so inspiringly. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any final words of wisdom that you want to say?
I'm just so glad to be here. Please follow me on social media. I'm so excited about my book, Between the Devil and the Deep Blue Sea. I can't wait to share it with the world and continue to support one another, continue to support women who are, we're just given such a challenging message. And I love surrounding myself with other women who promote the same message that we are wonderful exactly as we are, and we don't need anything outside of ourselves to feel happiness. The magic is in us all along.
I love that. The magic is in us all along. I love that. Well, on that note, thank you again for being an amazing guest. And I look forward to hearing how you get on and seeing your success in the next year.
Thank you. I know our paths will meet again.
Indeed, indeed. Well, thank you, Jessica. I do hope you enjoyed that episode. And I always highlight what people say with the what does thriving alcohol-free mean to you? And again, Jessica gave a very wonderful description, and she said it's living the best, happiest, most authentic version of yourself. So I do love that. I always think it leaves everything on a high, and I wonder if you're thriving alcohol free, or if you are looking to thrive alcohol free, or if you're ready to take a break from alcohol. If you are, feel free to book a clarity call with me, and I'm happy to have a chat and just see where you are on your alcohol-free journey, and I'll give you some tools and tips that might help you on the way. So feel free to book a call. I always love to connect with people. So you can head to my website, thrivealcoholfree.com, and book a clarity call. The other thing is I'm currently doing a sale of my Cocktail of Clarity self-paced online course. So this is just for you to be able to do it on your own, in your own time, go through it. And that is available at 25% discount at the moment. So if that's of interest, I'll also leave that in the show notes so that you can take a look at that and see if that's something interesting for you to do. And that will be available at that sale price until Monday, 24th of June. Okay, well, I hope all of those things are helpful for you, and feel free to get in touch. As always, I'm at Thrive Alcohol Free on Instagram. And yeah, I hope you have an amazing week, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Take care. Thank you so much for listening to the Thrive Alcohol Free podcast. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe so you get alerted every time I drop a new episode. I'd love it if you could rate, review, and share this episode. Feel free to tag me on Instagram at Thrive Alcohol Free and follow me for daily tips. If you would like to work with me, I offer one-to-one coaching sessions and have my group coaching program. If you're not yet ready for coaching, I also have a self-paced online course, which is a companion to my book, A Cocktail of Clarity. All the links are in the show notes. I will see you in the next episode. Have a wonderful week. Take care.